Many people are being confronted with a lot of things they're having to let go of at this time, insecurities.
Yeah. Is it a choice to be afraid then? Is it something you can choose?
Sometimes you can choose it because you may at some deeper level know, okay, I can choose fear or I can choose trust. At another level, there is of course the collective experience which stimulates the nervous system within an individual, which in turn generates a feeling which the mind calls fear. I think it's important also to look at this and to say, well, fear is what people call a feeling. And when it becomes labeled, as it would be with fear, then stories become attached to it. It is much better, as I would teach, not to give names to any feeling that you have, because names attract stories.
Okay.
It attracts other people's stories. It attracts memories from the past.
And of
Whether
course
it is
the energy.
fear, whether it is fear or anger or sadness, it's an emotion, an energy in motion, something is moving, and it's much better to let it move, rather than to say, oh, I'm scared, and then to allow the story to build up, which therefore directs your life.
Yeah, you can step out of it. Huh?
You can step out of it.
I learned it in the end, but I think people who are really caught in it, don't know how to do.
No, but there isn't a how. The moment you're just thinking, how do I do this, then immediately you engage your mind already, and again you're stuck in duality. It's a process. Once you are really addicted to the fear or identified only with fear, it needs something even greater to happen in that individual's life to force them in a way, to propel them out of the grip of fear. It may be a very wonderful experience. It may be something that will cause a momentary or an instant waking up. Because people who are in fear are asleep. They're sleepwalking through life.
Ah, good.
So it requires a real wake-up call. And perhaps this brings us to the subject of what is happening in your world at this time, which is generating a lot of fear, but it would be much better if people could say, wow, what is this wake-up call about? What are we being asked to wake up to?
Okay, tell me.
Yes.
What is it? What is it?
You're being asked to wake up to the only true power, which is love.
Okay.
To not take the world so personally. To be able to remind yourself that no matter what may be happening at the level of three-dimensional reality, there's still that higher power that is functioning. And requires the individual, as many individuals as possible, to be open to allow that higher power to work through it. The love is always greater. Yeah. Again, here I can remind of what another great disciple taught when he said, perfect love casts out fear. So the perfect love, which is the experience of contact with that higher power and the servants of that higher power, that instantly neutralizes fear. This is why so many people, you will read stories, there are many stories I'm sure to be read about this, who in the moment of, shall we say, potentially greatest crisis, which would otherwise be a terrifying experience, they step into a place of no fear. They step into a place of surrender. They step into a place of trust. Whether it's because they're going to meet their death, whether it's because they're going to perform some heroic act, suddenly the higher power is one with them. People make themselves small. They think they're not having the power or the ability to really make a change, but everybody has a hero or a heroine in them. And it's not about making bold statements and making a big noise and being driven by ego to do something big and important. No, it's because it's born out of the spirit.
Why do we make ourselves so small? Is it a kind of a habit of human beings, or is it
It's a fear.
Oh.
It's a fear of expecting, of accepting power. People are frightened of power. They have the wrong idea of power. Power has become such a negative word because there are so many abuses of power. And so people are frightened that if they really embrace the totality of who they are, that yes, their ego may run ahead of them, they may be punished or whatever it is, but the power that is there is love. It's just that. To be in your power is to be in love, to be a presence of love. And people are frightened of that. This is such a bizarre attitude of human beings that actually the thing they want most is what they're frightened of.
Yeah, that's very strange.
Yes,
Yeah.
because of the misunderstanding of what it means to stand in your power. Anyone who, in a moment, a spontaneous moment, will step forward to perform some heroic act, it's not ego that gives them the courage, it's love that gives them the courage. It's the alignment with truth that gives them the courage.
Yeah. So what is happening in this time is that all the fear is triggered in everybody,
Yes,
even let me say, people who are quite well
yes, yes.
involved in spiritual.
But imagine this, dear one. Imagine if you were going into a room full of people smoking cigarettes. You would end up smelling of smoke too.
Yeah.
So it's almost unavoidable in an atmosphere that is so full of fear that you're going to be affected by it. It asks you only to be aware of it and to realize, well, doesn't have to be my fear. I'm just being affected by what is happening around me. But there's also, if we again take the word fear, we're giving a name to something. Fear could also be said to be a name that defines an experience of an absence of love. That's not to say that you don't have love. But in an experience of total awakened heart, there is no fear. So in a way, it's good to recognize, oh, I have something which the mind calls fear. That tells me that I'm still have a few steps to take before I embody that fearless, radiant heart. It's not to be judged, it's not to make it wrong. And we want all our friends to have the courage and the belief that they can step into that state of having a fearless, radiant heart. And what is happening where there's so much, maybe reasons for fear, is because, as the saying goes, love brings to the surface anything unlike itself. Just as your garden wouldn't grow very much if the sun wasn't shining on it, bringing things to the surface. So there's great powers of light now shining on the planet, and one of the effects of that is to bring everything to the surface, including fear.
So the things that are happening now at this moment are seen to become worse, huh?
Yes.
And worse and worse. Is this
Yes.
going on for a long time, or?
I don't have a sense of time, and I don't want
Oh,
to
no.
give a time, because
That's
that only is going to engage the mind. And if you're going to engage the mind, you're going to be depriving yourself of the bliss of being able to be in the present moment.
Oh, yeah.
So
Okay.
I don't want to get into stories about mind.
Okay.
But a lot is happening because the forces of light are causing it to come to the surface. The choice is then given to our friends. Are we going to be observers of this, or are we going to lose ourselves in this? Are we going to see the gift in what is happening and let it help us to resolve the importance of being a presence of love and therefore bringing a positive contribution to the world? Or are we going to become infected with that fear and create greater closing of the heart? It's an unavoidable process. It's going to get worse. And the more fear that's there and the more judgment is there, the more terrible things will happen, because that fear and judgment is feeding the fires of these, shall we call, darker forces. And they will act out even more.
Okay.
Remember, I say this so often in many different circumstances, the world will dance to your tune. And what we see is a world of duality, from which comes pain and suffering and fear, dancing to the tune of the unconscious, collective fear of the rest. So, to go back to what you said earlier about what can happen to an individual, if there's no fear, it won't happen.
But let's talk about these dark forces. You called them dark forces, and that's, I think, one of the problems also, that people who think they are awakened
Yes.
are talking
Of
about
whom there
dark
are many, of whom there are many.
yes, but they think awakening is that you realize there are dark forces and
Yes.
they start to fight them again.
Yes, and that only feeds the dark forces.
Yeah.
It's not the best term to call it.
Yeah.
What I much prefer is the attitude that those who, shall we say, dress up in the uniforms of dark forces, that they are challenging the individual to step into love. This is a gift. You know, a lot of these stories began with what you would call your fallen angels. Lucifer.
Okay.
And Lucifer was an angel who, I would say, made a conscious choice to separate out from love, to fall, as it is called, and therefore to carry all the projections of evil and so on, in order to provide a reason for a conscious choosing of the light. So all those who are carrying out such acts of violence in a way, they could be used in the same way. They could be a reason to consciously choose love, consciously choose fearlessness.
Aha. So, do you mean it's like we have kind of a film in which we need these bad characters to...
Yes, to help the plot unfold.
Okay.
Yes, it's
Okay.
all one giant soap opera, one could say.
Yeah.
But what is also important to remember, of course, is not everybody has the same strength of character or of self-control or wisdom. And there are those who are part of these dark forces, I want to just use that term to delineate them, who are attracted to be part of that collective because it's an opportunity for them to discharge their own personal pain and hurt and anger and rage. And, yes, therefore, they carry out, in human terms, terrible acts. But those who are doing it is a collective of those who are deeply wounded. If not personally, then they're carrying the history of their tribe or their ancestors of deep wounds and disempowerment. And they're acting out. They're acting out. And therefore, the only way, and I know this will ruffle a few feathers, not necessarily white feathers, but some feathers, is forgiveness. Forgive them, for they know not what they do. But they're playing a role in the unfolding of the story in the same way as Judas played a role. Without Judas, there would not have been the story of the resurrection. And humanity, in many ways now, is on the cross.
Okay.
Anyway, in the Garden of Gethsemane, awaiting the moment of betrayal. So there has to be someone, an individual, as it was in the case of Judas, who was chosen by Jesus to betray him. Or it has to be a collective consciousness, as those who adhere to terrorist groups. They are there to play their role, without which there will not arise the calling to step into truth and light.
Can we see the president in Turkey, for instance, Erdogan? I don't know if it says something to you, but I hope so. Can we see it like that, or the president?
Yes,
Yeah.
he's playing a role in the story, in the
Yeah.
soap opera. In this particular case, he is somebody who wants to rule by division, divide and rule. So he needs an enemy.
Ah, yeah,
This is his story.
yeah.
And that's part of his own, probably biography. Who knows what has happened even generations back in his family, that he's somehow trying to put right an old betrayal, an old story, an old wound.
But all these
But of
people.
course it is going against the whole theme of the time in which you are living, which is overcoming separation and experiencing oneness. It may take some time, generations even, for the people of his country to awaken to the alternative. We don't want division. We don't want definition by tribe, by religion. We want the oneness. So everyone affected by it is given a choice to stand up for truth, not for one side or the other, but to stand up for the highest in humanity. It may take a long time,
Okay.
but an old wound has been opened, and this is also what is happening. In countries where there is division and between religions, old wounds are being opened up.
Okay.
The wounds were covered over before there was a chance to remove the dirt, and if you try to do that, the wound will just fester, it'll become septic, and be even more dangerous.
Yeah. And Turkey is in the middle of everything that's happening in the world at
Yes,
the moment.
yes.
So
It's a focal point
yeah.
of many different interests.
Yeah. It has also to do with the men-women relationships. Eh?
Of course.
Everything what's going on in that area is showing us our history.
Yes.
Of course, this man with power and fighting and everything, it's like the Middle Ages what's happening.
Yes, yes.
Yeah.
It is. But it's about the need for male dominance,
Yeah, but
the hunger for power.
yeah. Why is it becoming worse at this moment?
Because the light is shining on it, and it is exposing itself.
Okay.
The light brings to the surface anything unlike itself.
Okay, what can
And if I can use perhaps another rather extreme expression, the devil always shoots himself in the foot, because the devil has such an ego. He can't keep quiet. He has to stand up there and show himself, but that's part of his stupidity, but also part of the gift. In the end, he can't be taken seriously.
So, in the end, they kill themselves.
In the end, they kill themselves.
And what is the best thing to do for women in this environment with this violent man?
So it is best not to identify so powerfully with being woman in a male-dominated society, but to find a sense of self that's in the power of their spirit, in the consciousness of woman, not necessarily in the gender definition. This is another interesting theme, of course, that in your world gender definitions are also changing. It's happening in a small way in some lands. But I think it's important for women not to limit themselves simply by gender definition, but rather by what it means spiritually to be a woman.
Yeah.
What is the divine feminine?
I think.
And that's where the power is.
Yeah, I think if we talk about this divine woman spirit, we talk about intuition, about taking care for
Yes,
itself.
nurturing, empathy.
Yeah,
Yes,
it's exactly what the world needs at the moment.
exactly, exactly.
Yeah. But how can we get it done?
You have to trust that
trust.
it is happening.
Okay.
There may be some way to go before a certain religions or nations are able to give equality to women, but it's only out of fear. The fear of the power of the divine feminine.
Yeah. Also our own fear, I think.
Yes. And the trust also that even the most extreme male is also an evolution. And there may come a moment where even they will awaken to the importance and the power and the need for the feminine. Don't forget, it's not down to human beings alone. That it's rather like there is a kind of chessboard, and it's not beyond the power of the highest to move pieces on that chessboard, where even a pawn can become a queen. There has to be the openness to see that, yes, the forces of light are working. And the more people who can recognize that and open to it, the more easily these higher forces can work. Because it requires also an open mind to be able to recognize it. to be willing to let it happen.
Yes, and why? Why is it going on? What is the meaning for you, for instance, for the light world? What's going on here on Earth? Why is it so interesting for you and important for you? I mean, you in the sense, all these light workers that we can't see, but we know they are there.
Yes. So, we are here in service to humanity. And with humanity, we are in service to God, to truth.
Yeah.
And so we have a higher view, of course. We are not taking the world personally. That is a great help if you don't take anything personally. If you're able to see a higher power,